Hey, it's Mark. I want to show you how to jumpstart your weight loss, especially when it comes to eating in this video. And I've found that there's three types of eaters. I'm going to go through all three and the patterns that have developed with them. But more specifically, I'm going to show you how to interrupt these patterns, create new patterns so you can start living that healthier lifestyle, start getting back into that waist size, dress size, getting off the meds, whatever the goal you're looking to do and make this year a fantastic year. So here goes. We got three types of eaters. The first type is a grazer. And a grazer, pretty much, they eat all the time. You know, they eat throughout the day, constantly picking. Sometimes you get up in the middle of the night and you feel like you have to eat food in the middle of the night to go back to bed. Then you have your overeater. And with an overeater, the biggest struggle is portion sizes. Going back for seconds, going back for thirds, eating a lot of food in those sittings. And then you got your emotional eater. And usually a person who is an emotional eater tends to eat when stress is triggered in their life, when they're bored. And also emotional eaters will eat because they have a loss of control, like they feel like they have no control in all other areas of their life. And the reason why they emotionally eat is subconsciously we've been conditioned that's the only thing we can control in our life. Now, is it possible that you can fall into more than one of these categories? Of course, but typically, usually you have one of these that is a dominating one for you. Okay, now, how do we fix these? Let me go through the patterns that are taking place and I'll show you how to create structure for yourself and to knock this thing out of the park. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about our grazer first. And if you got a pen and a piece of paper, if you want to jot this down, fantastic. One of the most important things is every time you learn something, you create new synaptic connections in your brain. However, those synaptic connections only last for 3 hours to 3 days. And eventually, if you forget the stuff, you don't start teaching it, start relearning it, you'll not create those new neural pathways. They'll kind of disappear. So it's important to write stuff down, learn it, internalize it, and then almost be able to teach it to somebody else. Okay, back on point here. Here we go. We got over here. Let's see. We're going to do 6, 8, and 4. We're going to do 18, 16, and 20. All right. Let me show you how to create structure. We want to set up a window of time restrictive eating, aka fasting. I like to call it time restrictive eating because when you give yourself a window, here's what happens. You don't have to think about this. You kind of pre-program yourself with that window. So I would start out with something easy, maybe 3 to 4 days a week in the beginning here. If you want to go all out and go 7, that's fantastic, but you start slow. Remember, the law of insignificance, little behaviors compounded lead to big, big, big goals and big, big wins. Win the battles and you'll win the war. 6, 18, you can start out with that. And then if you want to move up, or actually you want to start out with 8, 16, and then 6, 18. And if you really want to go pretty hard on this thing, you can go a 4-hour window of eating with a 20-hour window of restriction on that. Now, a couple of tips is this. You want to structure this around your lifestyle. For example, if you like having family dinner, what do you want to make sure you do? You want to make sure that your window includes that family dinner. You don't want to be sitting there at dinner while everybody's chowing down and you're sitting there depriving yourself of a family meal that you could participate in. So for me, I used to be a big breakfast eater. I'm not so much anymore. I typically will eat breakfast around 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I will start my window of eating then, and depending on what my restriction is or what I've set out for myself, I'll stop. The last tip I want to give you on being a grazer is this, is you probably don't want to eat too much too late, close to sleep. They say stopping about 3 hours to minimum 2 hours prior to going to bed will give you the best benefits when it comes to sleep. And as we all know, sleep is the most important thing we could do for longevity and health in ourselves. Okay, secondly, so that's kind of your grazer. Now, as an overeater, typically the overeater has problems with refined carbohydrates, pizzas, bagels, muffins, pasta, biscuits, breads, refined carbohydrates. I want to show you how this kind of works, and I want you to visually imagine a dinner plate. It could be obviously any plate, but a dinner plate here. And if you're following along here, draw a line down the middle, and then around 4 or 5 o'clock, and then somewhere around like 8 o'clock, between 8 and 9 o'clock here. Over here, the first thing is protein, and I want to talk about that. You want to focus on making the protein on your plate the biggest portion. And as a matter of fact, I suggest you get 1 gram of protein per pound of healthy body weight, and I'll explain why in a second, that you are planning to be. So if you're 200 pounds right now and you want to get down to 140, you want to get around 140 grams of protein in per day, spread out through how many meals that you're eating throughout the day. Couple of reasons. Number one is this: protein helps you maintain muscle. If you're over 50, you are losing 1% muscle every year. So you want to make sure you maintain as much muscle. Number two is protein will satisfy you for longer periods of time. And number three is this: 15 to 20% of the calories of the protein get burnt up in the digestive process here. It's the thermic effect of food. So by doing this and hitting these goals, you can actually take anywhere from 3,000 to about 3,500 calories less in per month by just doing this. So that's, and by the way, it takes you, what do they say? 3,500 calories to burn 1 pound. So you do this over 1 year, that's 12 pounds you just lost right there. Over here, you want to add what are called resistant starch foods or high volume foods. Now, high volume foods are foods that are very large portions, but they fill you up, but they don't have a lot of calories to them. Resistant starch foods or carbohydrates are foods that have a lot of fibers in them. They're good for your gut. They're good for your microbiome. They satisfy you for longer periods of time, and they should be probably about a decent portion of the plate. And then over here is kind of an open window. You could do your fats, your refined carbs here. That should be the smallest portion on the plate. So more on the protein, Google resistant starch, high volume foods, and then the fats and the carbs should go there for the most part. Now, when it comes to emotional eating, most people, when they think of stress, which is what triggers emotional eating, they think of stress being a bad thing. And it can be a bad thing. There's two types of stresses, and I want to help you reframe the way you see stress. There's good stress, which is known as eustress, and there's bad stress, known as de-stress or distress. So far, pretty easy. Now, within the stresses, there's actually 3 different types of stresses. The one we're most familiar with, and I'll show you how this pattern develops of emotional eating. We have emotional stress, we have chemical stress, and we have physical stress, okay? Emotional stress is basically the thoughts you have and the emotions tied to those thoughts. Chemical stress is what you put into your body, the food you put into your body, whether it's good food or crappy food, the alcohol, the chemicals that we take in, the drugs, chemicals that we put into our body. That's all going to trigger chemical stress. And the physical stress is how that we respond to that taking place in our body. So let's go through the pattern that's taking place right now. Let's say you have an argument at work. What happens? You get home, had a crappy day. The go-to for emotional eaters is typically what we call comfort foods, refined carbohydrates. It's usually not a salad. We'll usually eat something that creates a short dopamine fix in our brain, which relieves that stress, which is either sugar or salt or carbohydrates or a combination of both of them. So what happens is, let's say we eat something crappy here. Now, once you do that, that will also trigger a physical stress in the body. Now, remember I told you there's eustress, which is good stress, and then there's distress, which is bad stress. If you're eating something crappy, do you think that's going to trigger good stress, like a salad would in your body? Or not so good stress? Most likely not so good stress. You got blood sugar spikes, you got insulin spikes, you got fried foods, you got, processed foods, chemicals in those foods. So what happens is you had an argument at work, you came home, ate something crappy, that go out there and triggered a physical stress in your body, which was not a good stress. And then what happens is, what do we typically do when we feel like we did something that was not positive for our lifestyle? We go back to the emotional stress. Why the heck did I eat that sleeve of cookies? Why do they eat those 2 donuts, that half a bag or bag of potato chips? And we start to beat ourselves up. I have no willpower. I have no motivation. And what happens is this cycle tends to take place. And when you do this year after year, which is what most people do, they do it year after year, all of a sudden this becomes part of your identity. This is your identity, and one of the strongest human traits is to be consistent with our own identity, even if that identity is killing us. And this goes on. The good news is this: if this is you, this is a pattern. There is nothing wrong with you other than you got a crappy pattern here. Now, I'm going to share with you how to fix this pattern, and it's really actually pretty simple. So let's go back to this. All right, let's go back to the emotional stress. had the same crappy day, instead of going out there and pumping something that's crappy as far as chemical, let's bypass that and let's go down to a physical stressor. Now, here's the physical stress that I want you to think about doing and I want you to start doing, and you could do it. Instead of coming home and eating something crappy, I want you to go for a 30-minute or a 60-minute walk or go to the gym for that time period. That's it. Stay with me on this, okay? If you want to do shorter, that's fine too. Now, here's what happens, and here's how I want you to reframe this. Think about this. You bypass this, you start going out there and walking or doing some exercise. It doesn't get rid of the stressful situation. You still have to deal with it, but what happens is by doing this, you took the level of stress associated with that emotional experience from an 8 to 10, and you took it down to a 2 or 3. Remember this, anytime something negative happens that causes emotional stress, that affects your limbic system, the emotional center of your brain, and what it tends to actually do is catastrophize events. Now, by going out there and creating this new pattern, you bring it down to a 2 or 3, here's what your brain is going to start to do. It's going to start to shift from an emotional response through the limbic system to going out there and responding through the knowledge center, the executive center of the brain, the problem-solving center of the brain. So what the brain will do is start figuring out solutions while you're kind of getting yourself going here. So all you did is basically replace the pattern here with a simple thing like exercise here, gang. This is a 5-minute fix you could apply to your life. Now, the last thing I want to teach you is this. You want to do these things for about 66 days on average consciously. It takes 66 days to establish a brand new habit, pattern, or behavior. It could be a little bit shorter if you have some kind of emotional leverage that you want to get done. But for the most part, you got to give yourself time to compound this thing out. Anyway, hopefully you got something out of this video you can apply to your life, live a healthier lifestyle. If you like this type of content, my name is Mark Patrick. I run the largest self-improvement company in the United States that does weight loss, stop smoking, and anxiety programs. Give us a like, give us a follow. It lets us know that you like this type of content. We'll put more out that can help you get to the goals that you want to accomplish and make this year a phenomenal year. Thanks for watching. See you soon.